What's up, fam? Welcome back to another chilling chapter. Before we dive into today's twisted mystery, Nero Wolfe and the Ghost Who Paid Rent, hit me up. What made you smile today? And where in the world are you listening from? I'm featuring your stories in the next drop, so don't be shy. Now grab your tea, dim the lights, and get ready. Because nothing in Nero Wolfe and the Ghost Who Paid Rent is ever what it seems. Chapter 1. The smoky whispers of Jazzit began in the sweltering thickness of a New York summer night, sound and scent mingling to form a heady, intoxicating broth. A late-night breeze filtered through the open window of the brownstone, carrying on its wings the distant notes of a piano, intertwined with the sultry whispers of jazz. I, Archie Goodwin, found myself wedged amid the aromatic chaos of Nero Wolfe's sanctuary. The orchid-filled study, fragrant with both life and the culinary exploits of its resident genius. Wolfe sprawled comfortably amid a fortress of his beloved. Flowers squinted with controlled annoyance as I rummaged through a stack of unsolicited letters on his desk. He paused long enough to lift his gaze, drawn from his perennial focus on food to the rapid movements of my hands. "Archie," he began, foreboding impatience in his tone. "If I had any interest in sifting through the debris of your habit, I would have made a career of grave digging. What has your latest foray into the realm of the uninvited provided?" Before I could fashion a clever retort, the telephone shrilled obnoxiously across the room, cutting through the mellow jazz. Wolfe cast me a baleful look. Picking up the receiver, his brow furrowed deeper at each second's delay. "Yes, Wolfe." His voice echoed with authoritative disdain as he identified himself. I couldn't help but watch, curious. "Who? Oh, I see. Where? Good. I want every detail. Yes, I shall send Archie." As he hung up, I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. "Nero Wolfe," he mused, "has been summoned. It seems a lady in distress requires our acute attention. Something to do with a murder." In this heat, you'd think they could keep their death toll under wraps until fall, I quipped. "The temperature of our environment does not affect the caliber of the crime," he replied, exasperated. "Proceed to the address. Obviously, you will amuse me with details." "Amuse you? You don't wish to be part of this little charade?" I shot at him, half joking. "With everything that is edible here, why would I venture into hell? You'll report back. While you collect your ingredients, I shall consider the recipe." A glint of pride sparkled in my chest. With Wolfe, words seldom lay idle. They were instruments of orchestration. I swiftly donned my light coat and buttoned it against the mingled aromas of sweat and salt that infused the night. In the cradle of New York's swelter, I caught a cab. My mind stirred with half-formed theories as the brownstone faded into the distance. The address led me to a dimly lit apartment on the Upper West Side. The sort of place that held memories tightly, with shadows lurking just beyond the reach of the inadequate light from flickering bulbs. Inside, the air was laden with the sorrowful residue of spilled secrets, deep breaths and regret. I was greeted by a woman in her 30s, her elegant presence dimmed by a smudge of despair. Her name was Clara Hartman, and the tremor in her hands belied her composed facade. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked, her voice a soft melody amidst the cacophony of emotion. I inclined my head, a simple compatriot of the illustrious Nero Wolfe. "Tell me, Miss Hartman, how can we assist you?" It's my husband," she stammered. "Duncan was found dead last night, crumpled on the club floor. A live jazz session, his head bashed in." At this I noticed her eyes flicker, scenting the danger behind every word. Who was the last to see him alive? She hesitated, then spoke. "Orson, a fellow musician. He was playing the trumpet. There was an argument, I'm told." "An argument? What about?" Duncan was adamant about keeping their jazz group together. The tension was palpable. Orson wanted to take a different direction. And did anything else pass between them? Her lips pressed together. "Words, mostly. Ambition, anger, men, you know how they are. And the venue? What jazz club was this? Crosby's, of course, where the city's heart beats to the rhythm of that infernal horn." I scribbled notes as she spoke, each detail weaving a vivid storyboard in my mind. The tension between the two musicians, Clara's strained marriage, and the location where the dice of fate had been cast. "I think it's advisable for me to visit the club," I said, rising. "Can you tell me where I might find Orson?" Supplied me with a curt address, handled with all the brittle care of broken glass, and I took my leave, feeling the weight of her despair linger behind like the smoke from a jazz club. The night was thickening, the hour approaching when sorrows thrummed louder and lives entwined dangerously. At Crosby's, jazz wafted like a siren's song, mingling with the clinking of glasses and laughter, a sharp contrast to death's cold grip. I sidled up to the bar, scanning the room. Orson sat in a booth, a troubled frown casting shadows upon his sharp features, nursing a drink. "Mr. Orson," I began, sliding across to him. "I'm Archie Goodwin. I'm here about Duncan." "Go away," he muttered. The kind of refusal that raises suspicion much like a jazz note, sharp and off-key. "You were the last to see him alive. Let's talk." His eyes blazed with defiance. "I've got nothing to say." "Then perhaps I should remind you of the charges that could bubble to the surface." At this he flinched, masking it quickly with bravado. "Fine," he huffed. "We had an argument. He was talking about fame, but Are you familiar with Crescendo Records? Why?" "Hiding inspiration would bore the world," I said, biting the bait. "Perhaps you'd like to share your musical ambitions." "Just let it go, Goodwin. You have no idea how deep this runs." He sighed. "Reluctant. In words, the truth might emerge." I flexed, reaching across the tabletop as his stormy facade softened. "But first, tell me about last night." He was boasting again. Orson sighed. "Said we needed to name ourselves or fade into obscurity. I didn't want to hear it, so I left." "But you returned." "Of course. The moment the argument ended. Did you, by chance, meet anyone on your way back? Was there someone who might have had an interest in your argument?" He hesitated, and there it was, a sliver of recognition. "Clara," he began, contemplation weaving through his features. Seconds ticked by. The rhythm of the jazz surrounded us, notes hanging like a breathless pause. "You needn't encourage idle speculation. Would you share the detail of your final encounter?" A shadow crossed his expression. "I don't know anything," he muttered. Yet I could see clarity sharpening beneath his furrowed brow. I stood. "Orson, by the end of this evening, if you hold any truths in your heart, I suggest they take form. I'll find my way back to Wolfe and summon you. Later, in the sanctified clutter of the brownstone, I recounted the evening's events to Wolfe, who regarded me through the veil of his orchids as I laid out the musician's tangled dealings. Orson, he mused between bites of his nightly repast, was indeed foolhardy. Ambition can strain friendships, though truth seldom yields. Familiarity, you see, breeds contempt. Shall we not linger over the melodies of our evening's performance? The thread of his thoughts began to coalesce in the air like a slow melody embodying our next steps. Your culinary excursions, I face-angled, intensify your focus upon the relevant. But what of Clara? She matches her beauty with a propensity for tragedy. Guilt may be woven tightly with an inconspicuous thread. You reckon? Archie, minor leaks expose the architect. The architect is she. Wolfe paused, his gaze penetrating. I mused at this revelation, pondering the evening snippets, the jealous ambitions that can ignite unthinkable circumstances, the fractures fraught with possibilities. Wolfe impassively adjusted his collar. Summon Orson tomorrow, if you please. And before you compromise tomorrow, pick up a dish from the kitchen. The music lingered softly in the air as the orchestrated complexities of the night unfurled, the wisps of jazz promising untapped secrets within the crevices of the city that never slept. Chapter 2. A Dime for the Grim Reaper. The following morning, the sun attempted to slice through New York's haze, a feeble effort that barely brightened the brownstone's stoop. Inside, the world was a tapestry of scents, woven together in the orchestra of Wolfe's kitchen, a veritable symphony of spices, with the twang of fish and the rich undercurrent of garlic. I stood in the study, squaring my shoulders against the languid heaviness of the summer air, ready to engage with Wolfe, who had just emerged from his culinary cocoon. He was draped in a bathrobe, a voluminous garment that accentuated his girth rather than concealed it, his hair's errant curls framing a face that dared one to inquire about an impending meal. Archie, he began, a hint of impatience lining his words, do not dilly-dally. Your nocturnal jaunts seldom align with my appetite for the sustenance of both body and mind. Every quest has its price, Nero, I retorted, relishing the edge of our banter. And it seems my rate includes a hefty portion of your gourmet delights. Shall we say one for clarity on the case of Mr. Hartman? Your delectable terms are misguided, he said, waving a hand with disdain. My satisfaction lies not in monetary exchanges, but rather in the harmony of well-cooked trimmings. Now, tell me your findings before I perish from indifference. I settled into my chair, uncrossing and recrossing my legs, allowing the familiar rhythm of our repartee to guide my recollections. Orson was a tight bundle of tension last night, but that man masquerades his ambition like an ill-fitting suit. After our chat, I took the liberty to visit a certain Mr. Vance at Crescendo Records this morning. Impertinent little bird, he remarked, studiously lifting a pastry to his mouth without breaking his gaze as he chewed. And what tidbit did he grace you with? A stark account, not unlike a bad tune. Orson wasn't the only one with a stake in Duncan's fame. Vance claimed Clara had been hounding them about signing her husband since winter. Not an ordinary request, mind you, but an insistent one. Insistent? Wolfe echoed, brow arching. Explain. Seems Clara had ambitions of her own. an undercurrent of determination bolstered by a dream. Mr. Hartman was born to be famous, she proclaimed, unsolicited. Vance hardly enjoyed those calls. He didn't say it outright, but the impression was clear. Her persistence was bordering on menace. "Menace is a curious word," Wolfe observed, finishing his pastry at an alarming speed. "And how do you propose to connect that thread to the lifeless form on the club floor?" Clara's claws were sunk deep into the husband marinated in insecurity. If Owen wanted to break away to carve a new path, it's not hard to see how distress brewed in their marriage. Orson intimated it was fatal ambition. An arrangement of desires gone awry is a recipe for trouble. Dissection of family dramas may lead us astray, Archie. Before you wander from your logical compass, consider the factors of this infantile bickering. Were any witness accounts given beyond those revolving around the trumpet's blare and a wife's yearning? Yes, as a matter of fact. No less than 4 patrons of Crosby's recall a sudden ruckus before his fall culminated in that unfortunate final breath. But also, I hesitated, scrutinizing the floor as if seeking answers. Within the grain, one of the waitresses mentioned a backdoor exit often frequented by Orson. A minor revelation, but worth following. Wolfe's eyes glimmered with a shrewdness that suggested culinary digestion had bred an idea. "Then, Archibald, let us head toward this prospect's feeding grounds and procure ourselves a morsel of evidence." "I'll grab my coat," replied, appreciative of his subtle encouragement and eager to further edge the investigation. The moment I set foot into the fresh chaos of the city, an absurd, stark realization dawned upon me. The pulse of life in New York was as palpable as last night's jazz. I maneuvered through the clamour of pedestrians, weaving through the outstretched arms of street vendors and into the dimly lit club, where echoes still lingered, ghosts flirting with the past. At Crosby's, the air was heavy with a blend of stale, cigarette smoke and music that faded, leaving behind the shadows of wayward dreams. The luxuries of the night before felt trapped, locked inside the velvet drapery that hung heavy around the stage. I approached the bar, searching for any remnants of last night's witnesses. "Etta," I called towards a rugged figure behind the counter, a tawny woman with curls coated in brightness. "You were working last night. Can you spare a moment? Che poi." "Tutto meif," set down her glass and wiped her hands on a smudged apron, narrowing her eyes at me. "You're not one of them, you know. Fisher never took kindly to nosy outsiders." "Tell that to the gospel of curiosity," I replied, leaning against the bar's edge, keeping the tone light. "I'm here about Duncan Hartman." Her face shifted, shadows flitting across her features. "The poor boy! But why do you care?" I hesitated, inadvertently tapping my fingers on the counter. Just like a good record, I enjoy delving into the scratch. "Tell me about the ruckus before it all unravelled. Who else was around?" Look, I only heard a bit myself. Most of it came from Orson's corner. But I did catch Orson coming out of the back right when the screech hit its peak. He had a shadow following him, but I was too buried with orders to see who exactly it was. Etta clarified, gaze flickering. "Valuable," I noted, but that shadow could help delineate motive and methods. The wheels in my mind shifted, gears aligning. "I should have gone after that guy," she muttered. "Sad old Duncan was on the floor before I knew what hit." Any other patrons repeat this or add colour to the night? I pressed. Find some inspiration here, Etta. A couple knew Orson, said he'd waltz in and out like he owned the place, but after the ruckus, he vanished behind the stage for too long. I noticed Clara sneaking back there too with a look that sent chills. Chills, you say? It began to click. Were you aware they argued previously? I don't eavesdrop on fights. I watch the tips, so I didn't know what they said. Things got dicey, but musicians are fickle. They fight about music like lost lovers. Indeed, I said, mind-reeling. In seconds, I manoeuvred back to the charming safety of the brownstone. Wolfe awaited, an impatient predator in his sanctuary, orchid blooms surrounding his silken robe. The chef was starving, Archie. You feasted, yet you returned empty-handed, he declared. Not quite, I replied, matching his tone with surprise. Etta provided me with promising leads, and I suspect Orson's alibi needs scrutiny. A discussion with Orson awaits. Tomorrow, then, you will summon him. Let us feast and furnish the salient points, Wolfe declared, his devotion to meals igniting a spark. As evening settled outside, my mind spun with the whirling chaos of our crime, ambition tangled with desire suffusing the air. Wolfe, I said slowly, a thought emerging unbidden. Do you think Clara could have guided Orson into this twisted waltz of loyalty? An accomplice, perhaps? Wolfe pondered this, a calculating gleam in his eyes. Manipulation of ego through a soporific tune is a close jest to an accomplice's cover. A married woman's grievances drown in desire, Archie. The collapse of one's hopes can climb to bloodshed if unwelcomed. We find the heart of hidden truths here, Nero. I intend to unravel this phantom pulse if it's the last chord I play. The final curtain falls soon, Archibald, he said, eyes sparkling, as long as you bear an appetite for justice. With that shared promise to face the echoes of their melodies, I sailed forth into the dusk, leading a sojourn through the rules of deception, a hunt for clarity as intoxicating as the jazz notes that danced and clamoured in the twilight of the city's vibrant soul. Chapter 3. The Lady in Red. The sun hung precariously over New York as the workday unfurled its grip, stretching the shadows longer. A spangled curtain draped upon the city's edges. I had barely crossed the threshold into the brownstone when I was greeted by Wolfe's unmistakable huff, a sound that echoed his displeasure far louder than the aroma of his latest culinary creation wafting through the air. Archie, he pronounced, seated in the velvety confines of his study, a clear-eyed portrait of annoyance as he meticulously arranged a collection of lush orchids upon his desk. Do not dilly-dally. What have you gleaned from your excursions? Good afternoon to you too, Nero, I replied, reflecting on his apparent artistic flair, while quietly marvelling at his uncanny ability to dominate even the most trivial aspects of ambience. Etta has a flavour for trouble, I'll give her that, but you won't believe who I ran into on my way back. Wolfe's eyes flicked away from the orchids, a sharp device of focus that could winnow down the chaff of whatever commonplace chit-chat I had selected to engage in. You make it sound rather like I should care. Let's say it was a coincidence that I strolled past Jazz Emporium and found Clara Hartman, I proffered, revelling in the moment's urgency while resisting the impulse to grin. Dramatic, a bit theatrical. She floated through like a cloud of perfume, just in time to catch me off guard. With a huff that might have emancipated the very essence of boredom, Wolfe leaned forward. "And you, my dear Archie, did not melt into the New York ether in her presence. An audacious feat." "Hardly a feat," I said, sticking my chin up, in mock defiance, while a wick of curiosity ignited at her mention. But she spoke about how her husband's latest tremor disrupted their home life. Perhaps a knee-jerk reaction to a tragedy, hiding layers of intent beneath that alluring exterior. "Intent," he echoed, raising a brow. "Precisely what inspired you to approach her?" "The music, Wolfe. The inquiries about that shadowy figure of the prior night. She had more than a few remarks to flit. Perhaps reading up on Mrs. Hartman would earn us a dessert of knowledge." Wolfe folded his arms, a compelling column of thought that suggested he was conducting a subtle evaluation of my reasoning. "And did you uncover anything worthy of my palate?" "She can't seem to let go of that clear crimson dress," I mused, trying to unlock his intrigue. "Like a siren attempting to drown her audience in pomade, she wears it time and time again. Maybe it's symbolic, a person of interest? Or simply a poor taste in attire," he replied, unimpressed. "Style is often confused with substance in our line of work. But if Clara herself is the link we need, then we ought to grasp at that thread, if not the gown. We're both trying to fit the pieces together, Wolfe. The late Mr. Hartman and his tangled web of admirers. A significant overlap, if you consume the current pulse in the city. Etta mentioned you'd made quite the impression on some folks around Crosby's." I trailed off strategically. "Make me a sandwich," he interjected coolly, "and I might bestow my truest concerns upon you. Only after I am sustenance-laden do I find visions unfold. An odd way to express gratitude," I quipped, shifting towards the kitchen that glimmered promisingly within the brownstone's cloistered confines. From a silver-lined cutting board, I deftly assembled a sandwich, layering thick slices of smoked ham, a swirl of cheddar, and a relish of herbs, all garnished with the sharp crunch of a dill pickle. A minute later, it was set before Wolfe, who regarded it with an air of satisfaction. "Now," he said, his eyes glistening with expectation as I returned to his study, "you may continue with your dull charade of florid prose." "Clara was nothing short of enchanting," I began, recalling the lady in red. "She held her husband's name like a secret, a shield of glamour warding off the lurking discontent. Unfortunate, considering his career was on the brink of crumbling. I barely got a word in before she recounted her insistence to Etta at the Jazz Emporium on needing more for Duncan, more than what he was willing to provide." Wolfe nodded thoughtfully, chewing in deliberate precision. "Ambition cloaked in longing, a dreadful melodic tragedy indeed. Quite. So, tell me, how does one chase down ambition?" I leaned in, intrigued. "You're the architect, Nero. The revelations await. Ambition often resonates with the dim notes of greed," he mused, setting the sandwich aside as if the urge to explore eclipsed even his culinary repast. "But who might our temptress be today? If Clara bears the persona of Twilight in red, surely there lurks a darker shade beneath. Then it's time for an encore at Jazz Emporium, perhaps," I suggested, my eyes igniting, to delve deeper into the symphonic landscape of her desires. "No," he said abruptly, "the direct route to failure is riddled with distractions. Send her a note, if you must, that stems from integrity and charm. ensure to ask her in the most civil manner. A lady like her cherishes goodwill and cordiality. Couldn't have said it better myself, I replied, entranced by my own spirited haste. A fine dinner should do the trick, and the promise of intrigue. She's selling herself on that hope rather keenly. Do so, then, Wolfe commanded, his appetite and keen insight sated for a moment. But do not become infatuated with rhapsodies of seduction. Remain in focus. As I spun on my heel, I heard him add, "And do bring me something edible next time." Later, after the clinking of silver and the bustling tempo from the restaurant had woven its way through my mind, I sat across from Clara, her vivid dress a canvas of elegance against the shadowy drapes of Jazz Emporium. The allure of candlelight flickered, casting shadows upon 9 serving secrets that danced between us. "Mr. Goodwin," she purred, the gammon edge to her voice sharpening like fine crystal. "What brings you here? Surely this is no mere social call." "Precisely, Mrs. Hartman," I replied, leaning forward, the convivial bounce of banter rising fluidly through the air. "Your husband, his ambitions bear revelation of untold weight." "Duncan!" "Humph," she scoffed lightly, the jest of casual dismissal wafting into the molecular environment of confined designation. "You seek more." "More than ambition, Clara," I countered. "Perhaps, dare I say, the very core of your expectations enveloped in the conjured resentment of his failures. Your conviction flatters, but I fear you've muddied the waters." Her smile glimmered, yet a tincture of tension dripped into her words, a harmonizing dispute on our shared stage. Mere co-stars with little desire to play the villain, wouldn't you agree? Yet your jaw clenches as you deny the twilled threads tying you to his final breath. I replied, reading her facade like sheet music. Artists and their boundaries sing songs endlessly. Some darker than others. A distant longing chased her eyes, a glimpse behind the curtain of her repressed turmoil. "Are you suggesting you barely play any role?" I pressed, leaning in to catch the notes, employing Wolfe's technique of relentless focus. Then a smooth curtain rises, and only your shadow remains. As I weighed her responses, the thwarted truth flickered anew. You arrived at yet another grand reveal, did you not? Perhaps that crimson gown served as a reminder rather than mere attire. A smirk played on her lips, the orchestra inside her heart rising to a deafening crescendo. "Perhaps, but Mr. Goodwin," she said, her tone turning serpentine, "it would be best for you to tread lightly. The final curtain can turn darker when shadows linger too long." In that moment, spark ignited in my mind, the elegant lady in red wielding threats as naturally as she spread charm. With each careful phrase, the dance we had conducted steered toward an undeniable one-act play of manipulation, ambition, and ultimately the retorts of loyalty that unfurled. "Then I'll ensure we're left with proper motifs, Mrs. Hartman," I quipped, rising elegantly. "And perhaps next time there will be more of the truth to yield beneath that vibrancy of silk." "Perhaps," she echoed, her red lips curling into a shadowy smile. "But don't mistake kindness for weakness." As I stepped back into the twilight of evening, a sense of triumph fused with the knowledge that I had cracked the surface of her delusions. The baser truth would emerge, revealing its grand connections like a melody, soaring through the very heart of a grand city. A jazz note resonating deep within the complex symphony of hidden motives. As Wolfe would always say, within every layer, the truth withheld itself, an undeniable odyssey for the curious. With the city twinkling around me in a waltz of shadows, I felt the anticipation brew, ready to lay bare the telling notes of ambition in all its lethal beauty. The dance had only just begun. Chapter 4. The mysterious messenger. I stood at the threshold of Wolfe's study as the clamour of New York droned outside, the evening trembling with the soft promise of rain. It was an hour past dinner. Not that Wolfe would ever allow such irrelevant things as time to intrude upon his precious routines. He was ensconced in his armchair, the plush upholstery encasing him like a great seal upon a throne of languor, a tray of fidgeting orchids perched near him, their vibrant hues catching the flickering light. "Archie," he proclaimed, his voice deep and resonant, with just the correct amount of ennui. "You have traversed the city and returned. Now, pray tell, why have I yet to receive the fruits of your labour?" "Good evening, Nero. I should say the flowers are delightful, but the air is no better," I replied, noting the trail of culinary scents that wafted from the kitchen, teasing my hunger. "Nonetheless, I come bearing something more pressing than a gourmet sandwich or your favoured beer." Wolfe's brow arched. "Your news often bears a dull sheen. Make it riveting, or I shall retreat into culinary reverie." "Right, riveting. It is," I said, allowing myself a grin. "Remember Clara Hartman? She's wrapped in intrigue again, but not in any transparent manner. It seems she's caught the attention of a persistent messenger. Someone new?" Wolfe's interest piqued, the clinking of glass chiming like an orchestra tuning. Indeed, while Etta was busy directing dances of intrigue at Crosby's, she spotted a fellow lurking about the Hartman residence, brisk and prim as if from a different era. Not the sort one expects at the door of such an enigmatic woman. "Continue," Wolfe urged, his tone a mix of curiosity and silent assessment. "Dapper, silver-tongued, and a tinge too mysterious," I elaborated, leaning against the frame of the door. That comfortable weight of energy buzzed in my fingers. "He arrived twice last week while Duncan Hartman was conveniently absent, a situation engaging enough for the police to look into, if they were ever inclined to think critically. But I, for one, couldn't let it lie." "A messenger, then? And what did you ascertain?" "Not much, but that only makes it more—" I let the word linger. "Mysterious. Clara's behaviour is a convoluted symphony of gentility and danger. She plays a brilliant aria of confusion, and this man's persistence could unravel her carefully tuned performance. Convoluted indeed. You seem enraptured, Archie," he noted dryly, fingers dancing over the orchids like a maestro composing. "Not enraptured, rather intrigued by the facets of her peculiar world." "The messenger's always after more than just messages in our line of work, wouldn't you agree?" And Clara remains expertly defensive, chasing shadows rather than confronting lit paths. "It seems you've taken up philosophy along with your legwork. Yet charm does not evoke intellect. Send for Clara, should you find she will indulge us with her charm," Wolfe commanded, a new flicker sparking in his emerald eyes. "Grease on it, Wolfe. A dinner invitation might stir her to our humble abode, where we can excavate her intentions over ham and roasted vegetables. All this he remarked, waving his hand dismissively, "and you've neglected to provide any substantial details of this messenger. He bears significance, I assure you." I chuckled. "When has anything elicited your attention without first being dissected by my sharp tongue? I plan to discover his identity post-haste. I'll bring my charming self into the equation." While Wolfe remained an immovable force, I slipped into the bustling streets of New York, where the shadows grew thick with whispers. The rain had begun its gentle song, tapping against the cobblestones like a clandestine signal tailored for secrets yet unspoken. The jazz emporium beckoned with its siren call of vibrancy even in the fallout of indulgent twilight. "Good evening, Clara," I greeted as I found her seated alone at a corner table, the gaudy silk of her crimson dress aflame beneath the shadowy canopy of two unfolding worlds. "I thought a fine evening would compel you from your hush." "Mr. Goodwin," she responded, her smile cast with understated grace, yet mottled with intrigue that stretched like a shadow at high noon. "Are you here for pleasantries, or for more inquiries into my life, uninvited?" "Politeness allows for both, Mrs. Hartman," I replied, taking my seat, eager to engage in the tentative dance of veiled truths. "I hear whispers of a messenger, a gentleman who has recently shown interest in your affairs." She leaned back, a hint of tension shifting across her features. "Rumours spin quickly through alleys and saloons, Archie. What do you hope to find in messages that a charming evening cannot unravel? Surely you've not invited me just for an elegant descant. Your dances of charm conceal deeper tremors. This messenger isn't a mere coincidence." A sparkle ignited in her emerald gaze. "Perhaps he is more than coincidence, but I would advise you to tread lightly. Our lives are often played like the finest of harmonies, and strings can be delicate. My apologies, Clara," I gestured graciously, "but the truth must bear its own sound. I am a mere observer, a hapless musician in a grand score filled with dissonance." A flicker of amusement crossed her lips, illuminating the tense air settling between us. "A musician, you say? You do play with clever rhythm, Archie. But tell me, are you prepared for the dissonance that could accompany its resolution?" "I've cultivated an appetite for dissonance. We men of the city thrive on revelations hidden within shadows," I offered, leaning forward, embodying my fervent intent to pierce her defences. Shadows merely hide the source of light. "Then your search might take a curious turn. Henry, that messenger, is as sonorous as you predict, but he's encased in mystery like a secret song waiting for its audience." I raised my brow. "Henry, you know his name, then?" She nodded contemplatively. "Offered flowers and tales of ambitious aspirations, but never any hint of his true motives. He's a conductor of perfumed discourse." "Perfumed discourse indeed," I muttered, contemplating the web of suspicions and ambitions woven so fluidly around us. "Dare I say," Clara continued, her voice slipping back into artistry, "be vigilant, Archie. You tread through an intricate harmony, and the cadence of Henry may be more perilous than anticipated." At that moment I was drawn into the eyes of the surrounding patrons, scrutinizing a pastiche of diners, undulating with their conversations. And then it happened. The messenger slipped through the door, dapper and poised, with an air that almost brought the intoxicating scent of intrigue. Clara's gaze shifted to him, her expression flipping like a record that turns. Eager, alert. "Ah," I said, suddenly igniting with a wry sense of victory. "The evening is about to get livelier. Play nicely, Mr. Goodwin," she warned, in playful mockery, the blaze of her dress capturing the light as she began to rise. "And do remember, every note has its place. Trust me, just like dinner, I plan to savor every moment." With that, I turned my attention to Henry, wondering just how many secrets he bore, concealed under layers of primness and charm. Wolfe would demand more than a fleeting experience. Our dance had only just begun. Chapter 5. Whiskey Dreams and Broken Promises. I stepped into the brownstone, the scent of rich, simmering broth mingling with the crisp autumn air that accompanied me from the street. Wolfe was where he preferred to be, ensconced in his armchair, a veritable fortress of crimson upholstery, his ample frame a bulwark against the inhospitable world. The stark contrast of the vibrant orchids against the gloom of dusk lent the room an air of vibrant artistry, like remnants of an extravagant party lingering as the crowd filed away. "Archie," he greeted, without raising his gaze from the copy of the New Yorker, "have you fetched my beloved steak, or am I to suffer through a dinner of culinary improvisation again?" "Improvise, alas, upon Wolfe's dire instructions," I replied, removing my hat and joining him in search of the dining room, where orchids had apparently overtaken the world of orchids that resided atop the dining table. I unwittingly managed to unearth a mystery nearby. Henry's identity as the dapper messenger has morphed into something more labyrinthine. "Then feed me this verbal repast with all the gastronomic artistry you are capable of," he said, his eyes still trained on the page. "If it must be your words, then let them be savoury." I settled across from him, allowing the gravity of my findings to sink in. Clara Hartman, our charming enigma, revealed this evening that her messenger is not merely a cad who peddles perfumed discs of discourse. His name is Henry Garside, a connoisseur of secrets, and it seems a collector of debts too. Wolfe shifted slightly, the sound of his chair creaking like a spectre from the past. "A collector of debts?" "Indeed. A whispering transaction unfolded beneath the canopy of the Jazz Emporium," I continued. He approached Clara and slipped her a note, all while signalling an unmistakable urgency. It reeked of unfulfilled promises and the kind of longing best suited for whiskey-soaked dreams. "I cannot salivate over your metaphors, Archie," Wolfe said, finally glancing towards me, an amused tightness forming around his lips. "What account of this message? Or is it merely an avenue for you to interject your clever turns of phrase?" Cautious and terse, the gentleman behaved not unlike a tightrope walker. Clara indicated that Henry possesses connections that flicker, like candles, a vague association with the Ashcroft Syndicate, I explained, watching as Wolfe's brow knitted into a frown. But more than that, well, he bore her an offer, a potential sum that would smooth over past grievances. Grievances? The woman is an artist of charm. Why would she want to bury a past which might yet bloom in her favour? Wolfe's keen eyes probed the depths of my revelation. "Simple. She's running from something," I replied, leaning back, a hint of frustration creeping into my own voice. Clara mentioned feeling suffocated by her past, and in that moment I could see the shadows encroach, even in the glow of her crimson dress. "Your insights linger like moisture, Archie," he quipped. "Now, what do you propose we do? Shall we descend further into this shadowy pit of despair? Why, yes, we could stir the pot until it boils over, perhaps visit Clara, or take a step toward Henry himself," I said, revelling in the thrill of the chase as much as the food. "How about a meeting with our friend Henry? Simplicity eludes you." Wolfe delicately picked at the orchids with his fingers adjusting them as one might correct a misstep in an elaborate dance. "Unless you believe it a strategy to reveal our presence, I prefer the luxury of information before painful interactions." Knowing full well that patience was Wolfe's most immediate virtue, I refrained from pressing the agenda. A simple visit to Clara may suffice, then, to unravel this further. "You prefer her subtle melodies over Henry's brass, I presume?" He sighed, as if my verbiage bored him. "You may proceed. A civilian encounter pairs well with your robust movement. I expect nothing less than the full score upon your return." With dinner lingering on the horizon, I settled into the night, adorned with the intoxicating anticipation of tangled motives. Clara might yet reveal more than she thought she concealed. The jazz emporium hummed with familiar strains of music as I entered, the atmosphere thick with laughter, and the low murmur of society weaving tales inescapably. The encounter with Clara bloomed anew in my mind like the jazzy notes dancing across the room. "Ah, Mr. Goodwin," she greeted, her smile charming, while her expression smuggled a hint of uncertainty. "Back for more whispers, or simply to rescue me from a night cloak of muted chatter?" "Rescue, of course, with hints of inquiry," I chuckled, taking a seat that offered a view of the restive patrons. "I understand there's been some intrigue regarding your friend Henry." "Henry?" Clara echoed, her perfectly shaped brows arching an inch higher. "Must you persist in turning the ordinary into the extraordinary?" "Ordinary, my dear Clara, is simply a mask for the extraordinary," I corrected, savouring the wisp of her affections. "Tell me, what kind of dreams does he offer? Or are his debts an encumbrance?" "I find you insatiable in your pursuits," she remarked with an incredulous grin. "The gentleman is enwrapped in perfume and whispers, but his intentions? A puzzle wrapped tightly in gauze." A silence fell, and my instincts sharpened, but I could not let it smother her truly flowing grace. "You've mentioned a debt," I ventured. "Whom does it serve? The syndicate, perhaps?" "Not all payments are financial, Archie." Her voice danced like silk in the air. "Henry offers freedom with a price tag of acceptance. He reminds me of possibilities." Our conversation was abruptly punctuated by the entrance of a new figure, tall and commanding, eyes sharp and discerning. Henry himself. The stillness around us momentarily silenced the jazz, and I felt Clara tense beside me. "Ah, Miss Hartman," he greeted smoothly, their eyes locking in a manner that hinted at secrets known only to the two of them. "I see you have company." "Mr. Garside," Clara replied, her voice feather-light, yet strikingly laced with authority. "As ever, your presence esteems the evening." "Perhaps I can reclaim what the shadows have hidden," he said, his charm a glimmer that might cut through the night's veil. With the sudden twist, it was Clara who took the lead, elegantly shifting the tone. "Henry, we were merely discussing dreams and debts. It appears you've summoned yourself to settle some matters." How astute dear Clara," he replied, the smile frozen yet predatory. "Dreams, however, can be perilous when converted into transactions, can't they? And promises, too, when broken," I interjected, feeling the full weight of the unspoken thrumming between them. "Henry, I presume you've some explanation for your resurgence." With a calculated poise, Henry turned his gaze upon me, an imperceptible flicker of recognition crossing his features. "Ah, the persistent Mr. Goodwin. Tell me, do you prefer the truth or the melodrama that follows?" "Truth is the note that resonates, Henry. Only the tune can reveal the clarity behind your intentions," I replied, the stakes razor-edge sharp. Before he could respond, Clara interjected, breaking the mesmerizing tension. "A toast, gentlemen, to dreams, paid or unpaid." I raised my glass with all mock seriousness, eyes never straying from Henry's. "And the dreams we shatter," I added, feeling the electricity of purpose hum deep in my veins. As it turns out, promises can cut deeper than a knife, and I suspect Henry knows this all too well. In that singular moment, with glasses raised and intentions laid bare, we stood at the precipice of revelation. The pieces were in place, yet the melody of our game strummed on, each note growing richer, drawing us all toward a climax neither had expected to write. The night wore on, and each word spoken held a razor's edge. In the world woven by Henry and Clara, the defining shadows were just beginning to escape their confines. All it took was one deft maneuver from Wolfe, and the truth would emerge, far more beautiful than deception could ever dare conjure. Chapter 6. Unstolen Fortune. The rain drummed a soft percussion against the window panes of the brownstone, painting the world outside in shades of grey. Wolfe was enjoying his evening ritual. A plate of exquisite beef, Wellington paired with a glass of claret. I stood at the threshold of his study, bracing myself for the symphony of disgruntled commentary impending once I announced my entrance. "Archie!" Wolfe's voice boomed, laced with the unmistakable irritation that only his appetite might. "What?" "You've returned, I assume, with more than the mere scent of the wet pavement. Your tardiness surpasses the culinary limitations of my current affair." "Good evening, Wolfe. Remarkably astute as always," I said, sidestepping his culinary complaint with a grin. "The truth is, I believe I've unearthed a most delectable crumb of intrigue this time." Delectable crumbs have become tiresome. "Speak, Archie," he snapped, his plump fingers adjusting the napkin on his lap, as though it were offending his sensibilities. "Henry Garside," I began, capturing the full measure of his attention. "It seems he possesses more than just charms and debts. Clara, Hartman is scarcely the only player in this game. He's been orchestrating a rather elaborate spectacle, one that involves a stolen fortune and an unfortunate young woman named Violet." "Stolen, you say?" Wolfe interjected, eyebrow arched. "How refreshing! Even the most mundane of affairs acquires a sheen of mystery and excitement. Proceed." "Indeed, it appears Violet is a dancer at the Jazz Emporium, distant, vibrant, and prone to misadventures with the wrong men," I explained, pacing with a slight spring in my step despite the rain. "Garside visited her last week, clambering into her life with promises shrouded in silk and shadows, but he bore more than just flattery. He brought her news of an inheritance, some distant relative's sudden passing, a sum substantial enough to ignite the fires of ambition." Ah, ambition. It has a convincing manner when softly spoken, Wolfe remarked, chewing on a particularly succulent morsel of beef. And Garside, the purveyor of dreams, managed to insert himself into this affair. For what purpose, may I ask? Ah, therein lies the rub, I replied, gesturing flamboyantly. Word comes that she's been swept into an entanglement of deception. Just last night, while taking Clara Hartman for a rather informative drink, I spotted Garside slipping Violet a note. It wasn't the tender missive one would expect from a lover, but something darker, a demand for funds. Wolfe leaned back, his bulky frame swallowed by the crimson confines of his armchair. And you expect me to regard this as a mere coincidence? Money, deceit, and a tapestry woven with the finest threads of betrayal. I see it now. Tell me, why place your faith in this Violet? Surely a fortune is worthless in the hands of the mercurial. I concur, I admitted, slowly beginning an anxious trot across the room. However, the young woman in question evokes my curiosity, and after all, she may yet prove to be our ticket into unearthing Garside's true motives. I suggest a visit tonight. It's high time we descended from our eyrie and confronted this lively tableau. Wolfe's lips curled into a mild sneer that merely hinted at interest, but dismissed the fervour burning within me. Adhering to your aeronautical aspirations is ill-advised, Archie. Still, the flame of pursuit burns brightly within you. I trust you plan to act with restraint and substantial caution. You can count on that, I replied, feigning innocence. After all, a moonlit soirée at the Jazz Emporium might lead us to unexpected revelations. Shall we? No, he stated irrefutably, his glare steely but faintly amused. You shall attend, as you are wont to do. With your tongue on full, display a glimpse at Miss Hartman and an investigation of this Violet wherever she resides, preferably without alarming the frustrated peace that dwells within my sanctuary. Moments later, I slipped into my coat and made for the door, smirking at my own entrapment in this delightful charade. Don't you worry, Wolfe. While you stay here to indulge in your culinary passions, I'll devote my evening to unravelling deliciously complex knots. Knots can be cut, Archie, should you not possess the gallant skill of untangling. Send me a telegram if your mouth runs untamed. He shot back, and with that I departed into the rain-slicked streets. Arriving at the Jazz Emporium, the heady atmosphere filled my lungs, the room thick with whispers, laughter, and jazz notes that slipped through the air like nimble fingers touching a grand piano. My eyes deftly wandered the crowd until they alighted upon Clara, holding court at a small table with Violet, who appeared ethereal even in dim light. Gentlemen abound this evening. I grinned as I approached them, noting the air of tension lingering about Violet like a muffled cry. "Archie!" Clara greeted, though her expression was a study of apprehension. "I see you survived the rain. I trust you are not here to meddle." Regrettably, so. I offered a disarmingly sincere smile as I settled beside her. It seems I've come with both good and bad news for our spirited dancer. Oh? Bad? Can't be worse than Garside's waves of charm flooding through every door he finds, Clara retorted, casting an uneasy glance at Violet. Violet's big blue eyes blinked back, and I sensed a flicker of trepidation there. "It's not about Henry, is it?" she said quietly. "Only Violet, if you say it is." I replied, scrutinizing the young woman's countenance. But I believe Garside's intentions have grown murky, and the inheritance he whispers to you may be tainted with lies. Lies, she breathed, pale but determined. What do you know? Enough to unravel a thread or two. Garside holds sway over you, promising freedom. Yet I suspect he seeks something else. Perhaps even the funds that accompany that inheritance he waxes lyrical about. God, no, she interrupted, the horror flashing across her face. I thought he was helping. He told me. Exactly, I said, leaning in, riveted by her response. He spun a world of possibilities. But do you know how well you trust your own fate in a game where ambition runs rampant? Before she could respond, a figure flared in the entrance, tall and unmistakably familiar. It was Garside himself. The tension in the room shifted, shadows interplaying with the golden glows hanging overhead. "Ah, Violet," he called, prancing toward our table with the air of an uninvited spectre. "There you are. I've been searching high and low." "That may be true," I interjected cheerily. "Yet it's not a treasure you seek, Henry. Tell me, what have you to gain from the young lady? You haven't stolen her heart, yet you cling rather close to her fortune." His smile widened but lacked warmth, the muscles in his jaw shifting as he pretended to consider my question. "Archie, my intentions are of the purest order. You see, I'm merely the guide to promise and fulfillment, with a leisurely path leading to betrayal, I suppose," I countered, feeling the thrill of challenge tingle in my fingers. "You've played your hand rather haphazardly. Why not reveal your stakes?" "Because it's you who doesn't understand, Mr. Goodwin," he replied with a languid tilt of his head. "The game I play is one where the stakes are a reflection of desire rather than greed, though a little influence can help draw interest, you see." "Influence?" I laughed, summoning every ounce of bravado. "If influence were a horse, you'd be winning, but perhaps by a crooked steward. Speak clearly, Henry, or I might just believe you once offered her a pathway veiled in shadows." "I believe, Archie, you underestimate the boldness within our dreams. It's not wrong to expect payment for drawing back the veil," he replied, smoothly, as if an honest man conversing with a child. There. A tremor of unease flooded the room. I could feel it fizzing against my skin like static electricity. I glanced at Clara, who remained resolute. Even Violet absorbed my words with newfound tenacity. And in that moment, my finger slipped. A correct act of instinct. It tapped the edge of Violet's drink, the liquid cascading toward an unscrupulous edge. With a gleam of realization, I turned to Garside. Perhaps that scintillating fortune of hers is less about treasure than we think. You borrowed a chance to turn her dreams inside out. If a fortune changes hands, it's not the one she inherits, but her essence you covet. The shadows shifted as Clara seized the moment. "You've surrounded yourself with deceit, Garside." A flurry of apprehension erupted, the air thickening with the tension of confronting untruth. Suddenly, Garside was trapped, ensnared not by the lie he spun for Violet, but the collective strength of us three against him. "You underestimate the vulnerability of your game," I remarked, high on the realization I had crudely laid out the pieces. "Tonight, Henry, you will lose not only your dancer, but the audience who bears witness to the wicked jig of your life." With sharp eyes, Wolfe stepped into my mind from afar. and the scene solidified in clarity. Clipped by Garside's own arrogance, the future unfurled. A modest fortune lay ahead, awakening through the mosaic of a new alliance against shadows veiled in charm. Tonight, it was the promise of dreams worth more than idle promises made. I raised my glass and grinned, compelled to draw laughter from light. A freshly composed wager flush against treachery forged of shadows and lingering truths, now unveiled like the finest melody spilling into song. A world freshly aligned, awaiting the storm to come. Chapter 7. The Secrets of Central Parket was an afternoon in October, chilly but invigorating. The kind of day that propelled New Yorkers outside to enjoy a fleeting glimpse of autumn splendor. I, Archie Goodwin, had just returned to Wolfe's brownstone, a damp sweater clinging uncomfortably to my back, courtesy of a careless jog through Central Park. Wolfe, as I expected, sat entrenched in his armchair. That grand piece of furniture, embodying both bulwark and bastion, surrounded by a fortress of books and a plate of what appeared to be his preliminary research into the culinary delights of pumpkin pie. I wiped the remnants of perspiration from my brow as I entered. Another splendid day in the park, Wolfe, I announced. His gaze flickered from one culinary volume to another, an irritable grunt surging from his ample chest. I find it intolerable, Archie, that you should traipse in here as though you've been performing acrobatics. It bodes ill for my plans regarding pumpkin pie. Did you bring me any clues from the great outdoors? Ignoring his theatrical complaint, I launched into the real matter at hand. You'd be amazed how much intrigue can be found in the shade of the gold dust-studded foliage. Get to the point, Archie, he rumbled, half-heartedly picking at an orange slice, clearly unsatisfied with his own culinary interlude. Idiot, seems our old acquaintance, Henry Garside, I began, leaning casually against the doorframe, has been spotted about the park, getting cosy with none other than Violet, the dancer you might recall from my last escapade at the Jazz Emporium. Violet, he repeated curiously. The one with vim, but evidently little common sense. Precisely. Garside met her by chance. I can already hear your insufferable doubts echoing through the room, I replied with a smirk. But crowned with this amorous rendezvous is a case of questionable timing. Initial rumblings suggest Garside harbours an unusual interest in the young lady's financial demise, as in an inheritance that has come to light under dubious circumstances. Interesting, Wolfe mused, his interest dissecting the layers. The promise of whipped cream atop the pie began to diminish in his regard. The juxtaposition of a dancer and a thief is hardly newsworthy, unless there's more than mere spectres weaving through this narrative. Ah, there is, my friend. As I mused upon an idea, I stumbled upon a curious figure lurking in the park benches. One Miss Clara Hartman, headstrong and in possession of secrets of her own. The only thing more dangerous than a man with ambition is a woman armed with conviction. Speak of conviction, Archie, as if she were on trial for her life. They often hold sway over unsuspecting fools, Wolfe replied, leaning back and pivoting his gaze toward the ceiling. And do you suppose I will get to enjoy my pie while you commandeer the evening's circus? Pushing the door wide and stepping into the living room, I carelessly tossed my hat aside, a grin playing at the edges of my mouth. As it happens, I thought a joint venture might prove rewarding. But I also saw it as an opportunity for you to indulge. There's a delicatessen just down the street serving a rather excellent pastrami. Bah! He interrupted, waving a dismissive hand that made it clear my culinary enticements were too pedestrian for his refined palate. Where does this lead us, Archie? Central Park. I thought a shared stroll might enlighten Clara about Violet's recent entrapment and tease a revelation or two out of Garside. After all, attracting a snake requires the right kind of lure. Wolfe stared pensively before relenting with an overheated sigh. Very well, I will remain here in pursuit of pie, though I do expect you to return unscathed. If you intertwine with any more absurdities, I will ensure the pie reaches your erstwhile ear. With a knowing salute, I departed once more into the crisp October day, my thoughts turning over the possibilities that festered just below the surface. The vast green of Central Park unfurled like a living tapestry, bright against the soft oranges of the season. As I meandered through the winding paths, I spotted Clara's familiar silhouette at a secluded bench, the very one where lovers often shared furtive whispers woven amidst the settling leaves. She looked up, her expression shifting from apprehension to relief upon my approach. "Archie!" she exclaimed, her eyes revealing the fleeting vulnerability of the moment. "You were right to follow." "Right and dapper as ever, I see," I retorted lightly, tilting my hat in a mock gesture of gallantry. "Wouldn't dream of abandoning you at such an intriguing junctions of fate. Are you still battling Garside's incessant charm? The man has a way," she began, hesitating as a nearby crackle of leaves betrayed movement. "Too much charm, perhaps. But can you help us? He's not merely a suitor, Archie. I believe he's mixed in far deeper than a guise of gallantry." "Goodness, is that so?" I gently pushed, keen to extract the trembling details. "What did you see?" "Last week at the Jazz Emporium when you spoke to Violet, I overheard a conversation between Garside and a man in a dark hat. They were talking about money, an inheritance," she confessed, whispering. "Something about the transfer being compromised, timed over the last few days. I thought it was just gossip, until the very next morning. That's when I discovered things were far worse than gossip." "Indeed." My mind whirred rapidly over both her words and the earlier recollections about Garside. "And where does that leave Violet?" Unaware and ensnared. I suddenly frowned, the pieces beginning to lay down the outline of a larger puzzle, one involving more than just twinkling lights and gliding dancers. With sudden purpose in my step, I shot a glance at her. "We must seek Violet. Let's return to her apartment. Perhaps her latest waltz through Garside's machinations is worth unveiling." Together, we traversed back across the park, steely, determination warming the brisk chill until we arrived at Violet's doorstep, its familiarity now charged with tension. Before I could knock, I heard hushed voices inside, a sharp, hushed tone tinged with urgency. "Garside!" I murmured, narrowing my eyes with sudden clarity. "He's here." Clara steadied herself just as I rapped insistently on the door. Footsteps hesitated, and then Violet's soft voice drifted through the threshold. "Who is it?" "Archie Goodwin. I'd suggest you let me in. You might find yourself in jeopardy." The door creaked open, Violet's dishevelled appearance betraying disquiet. "Archie, Before she could finish, Garside materialized from the shadows behind her. A nonchalant smile stuck like paint to dishevelled wallpaper. What a coincidence, shall we say, that the little dancer receives not one, but two suitors. I could hardly hold down my instinct to lunge, but I measured my words instead. "We've come to ask why you've found it necessary to darken Violet's doorstep, Garside." He adjusted his collar, feigning innocence with a gleaming facade that served only to agitate my senses. "Merely a conversation, Mr. Goodwin. Speak freely, should it enhance your understanding, and who needs more than that, I ask? Are those words veiled, sir? Or do you speak as one truly unaware of the stakes now glaringly illuminated?" He plucked a piece of lint from his coat, only to regard me with an unbending scrutiny. "We shall see, Archie. A man's ambitions can become pleasantly tangled. However, ignored truths often have a way of dancing right over one's shadow." Indeed, I leaned forward, my gaze locked onto his. Violet's essence is not merely a pawn to be traded. You see a path ahead that cloaks the truth with dreamlike allure, but the charade ends here. She is not the only one winning while you fabricate your story within the folds of wealth. His confidence faltered, if only for a moment, but it was enough. "You'll pay for this infraction of hubris," he hissed, that pretentious veil of authority cracking, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the polished surface. "Only if a dance can protect you from the glaring truth of guilt, Garside," I countered, smirking. I turned to Violet, tugging her forthrightly away from the brooding figure now trapped in a web of disbelief. "Come along, Violet. Let's untangle you from this shadow." I could feel Wolfe's mind echoing back to my rescue, anchored just as the innate high stakes of criminal ambition began dissolving with a clarifying intensity. The shadows dissipated, and the light of truth gleamed through once more. In that moment, even Garside must have sensed the roots of defeat, for he offered nothing more than a close-lipped smile, ill-fitted for a man now outmanoeuvred. The course ahead was unclouded and clear, and I felt the promise of the evening silhouetted above, where once obfuscation ruled. And as I led Violet gently away, a jolt of victory felt like the sweetened taste of that pumpkin pie we would one day share, in celebration of unravelling the secrets of Central Park. Chapter 8. The Broken Clock. The rain fell lazily against the brownstone's thick windows, creating a symphony of soft taps and splashes, the sort of melody that would rouse the fondest memories in anyone who had a penchant for nostalgia. I, Archie Goodwin, perched on the edge of my chair in the study, drumming my fingers idly against its arm, while casting an occasional glance at the formidable figure of Nero Wolfe, who loomed in his armchair, a portrait of indifference. In front of him sat a formidable plate of apple tart, dusted with cinnamon. "Archie," Wolfe finally intoned, his voice heavy with exasperation, "if your incessant fidgeting produces a single more syllable, I shall personally bring the full weight of my culinary expertise upon your head." I grinned, trying to stifle my amusement. "I'm merely preparing for our next case, Wolfe. Anticipation is the flavour of life after all." Without looking up from his tactical evaluation of the apple tart, Wolfe grunted. "I find your selection of metaphors oddly lacking, like a pumpkin devoid of spice." He speared a luscious bite and chewed thoughtfully, taking especial care to savour every nuance. "Delightful as always, Chef Wolfe," I replied, leaning back. "But our friendliness may soon require some French seasoning. A little bird told me our old friend Garside has stepped into a world darker than his last rendezvous." Wolfe's interest piqued, his fork pausing mid-air. "Do enlighten me, Archie. I am weary of detours. What now has our resident thief unearthed in the underbelly of society?" I rubbed my chin reflectively. "It's a shady business involving a clockmaker and a broken timepiece. It appears Garside was seen haggling over an antique clock reputed to be enchanted. Or rather, its owner believes it holds secrets far greater than mere craftsmanship." "The inherent frivolity of antiquities," Wolfe murmured as he resumed his pleasant dismemberment of the tart. "Tell me that our friend isn't planning to abscond with a mere porcelain trinket." "Oh, it's more than that, I assure you. The clock represents a feud over inheritance, and also a hidden fortune far older than Garside himself. I crossed paths with Clara, who had her ear to the ground again. She relayed that Garside stoked the flames of jealousy between rivals, while masquerading as a harmless admirer, and we know how thin the boundaries are in deals like that. Indeed," Wolfe spoke, almost to himself, "a jealousy-fueled desire for acquisition which could just ignite actual flames. Here we have not just a thief, Archie, but a strategist as well. Who might this rival be?" "A fellow by the name of Simon Trask, a peculiar clockmaker whose workshop bursts with peculiarities, one of which appears to be envy, festering under the weight of dwindling prospects." I rose, my excitement building at the prospect of a night's endeavour. "What do you say we pay Simon a visit? Perhaps we can charm the gears of truth to turn in our favour." Wolfe waved me off, his eyes narrowing with knowing annoyance. "Charming? The gears? You avoid nuance, Archie. This calls for a more dignified approach. I shall remain here, and you shall arm yourself with both charm and your head for such business." I donned my overcoat with a flourish before heading for the door. "Do take your time with that pie. I'll bring you back something more substantial when we crack this case open." "Bah!" he echoed, the typical Wolfe retort. "But if you expend unnecessary energy, I may yet be forced to concoct an unrelenting surveillance over any enticing distractions you may encounter along the way. Be firm, and set me free from your clutches." With a smirk and a salute, I sauntered out into the rain, absorbing the city's scents as the smells of damp asphalt mingled with the distant notes of jazz bleeding from a nearby speakeasy. The clockmaker's shop, nestled in a narrow street, was neither grand nor lamentable. Rather, it stood resolute, its front window adorned with gears, dials, and golden chains that twinkled under the flickering glow of neon gaslight. I entered, the door protesting with a creak that rang throughout. "Welcome," called a voice, almost too energetic for the murky confines. Simon Trask emerged from behind a velvet curtain, a dusting of chalk-white powder clinging to his brow, while wrapped in layers of grease-stained cloth. His face was animated, illuminated by an uncanny glint in his eye. "May I treat you to the wonders of time itself? Ah, Simon, I come not for treatment, but information." I countered with an appraising glance around his kingdom of mechanics. "I need to know about a certain broken clock. Rumour has it there's a tale worth examining." Trask's demeanour flickered momentarily, surprise darting across his features. Yes, the one that Garside is circling like a vulture," I interjected, watching his reaction closely. "I suspect you're in his sights." Trask straightened, excitement slipping into a defensive posture. "He's not the only one with an eye for antiquities. That sinister gentleman seeks reward at the expense of loyalty. I refuse to be a pawn. Decay. Any case, are we not further entangled in this mischief? Garside, rumours of a broken clock, possible treasure, and whispers of envy. Where does the trail lead?" Trask's expressive features hardened. "All this leads to bitterness, Mr. Goodwin. But the broken clock, an heirloom belonging to the Gildersleeve family, was crafted by my grandfather. They think that by having it, they can overthrow one another and take hold of a very ancient secret, one rooted in a fortune that remains shrouded in mystery. However, lies and greed only lead to ruin." As he spoke, I caught something glimmering beneath his countertop, a clock, its face cracked and glinting under the dusty haze, with a note pinned rather crudely. What of the news that Garside may have visited with dubious intentions? A foreshadowed calm fell over Simon. All I know is I saw him here, haggling. But when I sought to show him where the real maintenance lay, he fled, claiming it wasn't worth the trouble. There lies the truth. It worries me more than the clock. A clever manoeuvre, I mused aloud, connecting the dots that seemed to shimmer like the golden hour. In his absence, might he already have orchestrated a dance with the Gildersleeves? Simon nodded vehemently. If he begins mingling with the family, turning their ambition into a playing field of treachery, then the truth will only be lost further in the gears of the game. My heart raced. Then we must turn the tables, Simon. If tonight he intends to gather them or extract further investment, we must precede him. With newfound resolve, I hailed a cab, returning to our cosy brownstone with a trove of knowledge and hasty plans. As I walked through the threshold, Wolfe looked up from an étude d'oeil, untouched slice of pie, his interest piqued once more. "Well, did you charm the gears, or was it another tumble into inefficacy?" "Neither, my friend," I replied, ushering him towards action. "Our charming Garside may have all the moves, but deception is the clockmaker's crime. This tangled intrigue can only lead to one conclusion." I adjusted my hat decisively. "The clock does not merely count time, Wolfe. It marks the inevitable." At that, Wolfe's eyes sparkled with the thrill of the chase. "Then let us unravel this clockwork of stupidity. Full speed ahead, Archie." As we set out, the evening was suddenly infused with an electric pulse of promise. The rain continued to wash the streets, but the draught of impending revelations propelled us forward into the centre of the storm. The hours ahead promised the kind of unravelling that illuminated secrets long buried, an evening soon eclipsed by the truth, forcing even the most stubborn clocks to yield to the unyielding passage of time. Chapter 9. Shadows of Old Money. The rain had given way to a damp fog that hugged the streets of Manhattan tightly as I manoeuvred through the twilight haze. I entered the brownstone through the familiar threshold, the scent of lingering herbs and roast duck immediately wafting through the air, courtesy of Fritz. Wolfe, of course, had positioned himself in his beloved armchair, a veritable mountain of indifference, surveying his realm like a sultan overseeing a kingdom. "Ah, Archie," he said, a touch of mockery lacing his tone, "what suitable mischief have you dragged back this time? I trust it wasn't a mere jaunt to the fish market. No fish today, Wolfe. Just some intriguing old money with a side of treachery. I paused, allowing a grin to tug at my lips. Clara was right. Garside is swimming with sharks, and I don't mean the proverbial kind. The Gildersleeves are hosting a soirée, and our cunning friend has taken it upon himself to join the festivities. Wolfe leaned forward, his dark eyes glinting with mild curiosity, momentarily cutting through his habitual lethargy. An event of that milieu typically signals manoeuvrings rather than socializing. I take it you possess further insights? I plucked a cigarette from the tin and waved it triumphantly. Enough to know that Garside plans to leverage his way into that family fortune, which has secrets as old as the clock I tripped over last evening. The Gildersleeves think they're merely tasting the fruit of their labour, but Garside's the type to offer a rotten apple adorned with shine. I am left to wonder why old money would invite a four-bit thief into the parlour, Wolfe murmured, crossing his arms. They didn't know he was a thief, of course. He wore a Sunday suit and spun tales like a spider spins silk. I leaned against the doorframe, aware of the dampness still clinging to my clothes. They are curious sorts, the Gildersleeves. If anyone knows what they guard so tenaciously, behind doors of mahogany and velvet drapery, it's bound to be their cousin Solomon. Ah, the accountant, canny and austere, Wolfe offered, his lips twisting into a small smirk. Do illuminate me about his role in this gathering. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help but chuckle. Solomon doesn't hide his talents, Wolfe, unless you count his talent for lurking. He understands the family's wealth better than they do, and he's not fond of Garside. Perfect. Wolfe's interest piqued further. I saw the spark of engagement alight within him. Shall need a silhouette to extinguish the shadows surrounding Garside's ambition. Moments later, I set out again, the fog thickening around me as I hailed a cab, and it wheezed to a stop by the curb with a protesting sigh. I was soon en route to the Gildersleeve residence, passing the charming yet daunting facades that lined Fifth Avenue, each more opulent than the last, before arriving at the looming structure that belonged to the family. Once there, I managed to slip in through a cleverly placed side door, one that offered access to even the most opportunistic interloper like myself. Inside, the grand hall stood in stark glimmering silver, with glistening chandeliers hanging overhead, each crystal pendant seeming to question the nature of wealth in a world steeped in shadows. My entrance did not go unnoticed, and before long I found myself face to face with Solomon Gildersleeve, whose skeletal figure stood stark against the plush velvet of the drawing-room. He wheezed half-heartedly as he adjusted his pince-nez, the corners of his mouth drooping in that peculiar half-grimace that only those who inhabit the lower rungs of high society seem to thrive on. "Good evening, Mr. Goodwin," he managed, his voice a wheeze of discontent. "I presume you come bearing invitations for the gala, or perhaps unwelcome tidings?" "Neither, Mr. Gildersleeve. Merely good wishes for your soirée and a query about its honoured guest, Garside." I nodded, eager to incite his curiosity. "That particular fellow?" Solomon scoffed, adjusting his glasses. "He best avoid the realm of the respectable, Archie. He's known to slink around the fringes like a rat, content to pick at the refuse of society." "A truly poetic description," I acknowledged, leaning closer. "Yet you didn't answer my question. What does he want with your family?" Solomon's brow knitted briefly. Then his demeanour shifted, an unmistakable flicker of uncertainty creeping onto his face. Why, the Gildersleeves abhor the man, but there's nothing he loves more than temptation wreathed in gold. You speak of temptation, but I'd wager there's a richer vein of interest here. A clock, perhaps? An heirloom? His voice dropped low, as if speaking of a spectre haunting the rooms. Yes, the Gildersleeve clock, a family relic. That cursed timepiece holds stories I'd rather keep buried. If Garside thinks to use it to swindle a fortune from us, it wouldn't surprise me, though how he knows its value is beyond me. A small mystery worth unravelling, I noted, seizing the thread and pulling. But I wager the proverbial clockwork has something deeper buried within its mechanisms. Tell me, Solomon, what exactly did your family do with it? Kept it, of course, as it was intended. He shuffled closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. But as long as I can remember, it was cursed. Something always happened when the hour struck midnight near it. Accidents, feuds, they plague those who caught its magic. Interesting indeed. I smirked, leaning against the mantel as I rubbed my chin. So, Garside's interest in the clock isn't solely monetary. It is a chess piece in a much larger game, wouldn't you agree? Perhaps he believes the clock can unveil some family treachery buried beneath layers of dust. Solomon's aspect darkened. If he has any inclinations to point fingers, it would spell disaster. You must stop him before he unearths the family secrets. Not so fast, Solomon. I suspect that Garside isn't the only player in this game. If something precious becomes known to him, it may lead to others who covet more than mere family. Drama. Suddenly, a shadow flickered beyond the doorway, a glimpse of a figure slipping past the gossamer drapes. I excused myself, slipping out of earshot, as curiosity tugged at me. The hall stretched toward the library where figures were gathered, and through a pane of glass I could see Garside, draped in shadows at the far end, speaking animatedly with a woman adorned in pearls. As I leaned in closer, a voice slipped through the cracks. No one must drag up the past, Garside. It's what they want to keep secret. My pulse quickened. Garside was stirring the pot. The delicate balance of old money against deception brewed a tension that promised volatility. A sudden clamour erupted, echoing through the hall. I pressed flat against the wall, just in time to see Garside's face contort with indignation. "Stay away, you fools! I have no interest in the past," he bellowed, "but perhaps your secrets are worth investigating." Before I hastened away to alert Wolfe, the whispers fell silent, and the clock struck ominously, marking the hour with a deep chime that resounded through the house. Returning to the brownstone, I barely crossed the threshold when Wolfe, resplendent, in his armchair raised an eyebrow. "What peril have you unearthed this time, Archie?" "Much and more, my friend," I replied, carefully tucking my hat away. Should we choose to silence the ticking clock of Garside's ambition, we might have to employ a different tact altogether. Good. Let us initiate our assault on these secrets before they implode, Wolfe said, steepling his fingers. The threads of old money run deep, which can ensnare even the most unsuspecting. Yes, but let's keep our eye on Garside's shadow. He might just find his desire to manipulate led to his own undoing. With that, the stage was set, a perilous game of power waiting to unfold. The clock might have announced the hour, but time, like Garside's machinations, would reveal its true nature before the final act concluded. Chapter 10. The Last Tango. The rain had released its grasp, but the chill in the air was thick enough to make a man think twice before venturing outside without a proper overcoat. I stepped through the threshold of the brownstone, shaking droplets from my fedora as the scents of old books and rich roasting meat enveloped me. Wolfe had ordered venison stew, but I was already anticipating the inevitable argument that would ensue over the evening's developments. Ah, Archie, back from your foray into the precincts of society's refuse? His voice, with a hint of disdain, echoed from the study where he sat, a veritable ship upon the ocean of his plush armchair. I trust you did not bring any erudite tidings of Garside's aptitude for eroding the walls of decorum. Very funny, Wolfe. Think of me as your personal alert on the timing of your dinner. I'd say your midnight meal is about to arrive, courtesy of the Gildersleeves. I slipped my hat onto the rack, stepping closer, aware that he would demand stories as a precondition for the meal. Garside? Wolfe's tone sharpened, as if I had mentioned a particularly unpalatable food. Pray tell, which mischief has escaped his lips this time? More than the usual, I suspect. He's wormed his way into the Gildersleeve soirée and was stirring up trouble with despicable grace. I dropped onto the cushioned edge of a nearby armchair, the warmth radiating from the hearth contrasting with the chill I had brought in. Your dramatic flair nears farce, he huffed, flicking a hand as if shooing a pesky fly. I shall need clarity, not the broad brush of your angst. Was he merely blathering to attract attention, or did he evoke genuine interest in whatever bottomless pit of secrets the Gildersleeves guard? Why not both? I shrugged, allowing the intrigue of the evening to unfurl. I gathered that Solomon Gildersleeve's behaviour toward Garside was 1 part disdain, 3 parts fear. It seems he's aware of Garside's curiosity, particularly concerning the fabled family clock. Ah, yes, the cursed artifact, one that time has all but forgotten, Wolfe said, his fingers steepling as golden light danced off his spectacles. And the clock in question conceals not only years, but perhaps shadows as well. Exactly. Solomon seemed on edge about Garside sniffing around their affairs, especially as midnight approached. There is a dread associated with the clock that he couldn't quite articulate, but it's enough to raise eyebrows in any man of integrity. None of which addresses what Garside intended to uncover, Wolfe pointed out, the corners of his mouth twitching in annoyance. Your odyssey yielded no clear leads on his intentions? I leaned forward, my composure fading to a conspiratorial tone. There was more at play than idle curiosity. Garside was heard declaring that the past must remain buried, which could imply more than mere family squabbles. My instincts suspect there are darker currents rippling beneath those manicured surfaces. Darker currents, Wolfe mused contemplatively. We do not possess a myriad of rounds for shooting in the dark. You must present me with a target or an ascertainable advantage. The parade of Garside's idiocy holds no weight without something tangible. A knock on the door interrupted our exchange. A timely one, as it turned out. Fritz emerged moments later, balancing a fragrant timber bowl of venison stew as if it were the crown jewels of an ancient dynasty. "Dinner is served, Herr Wolfe," he announced, tugging his apron before retreating for the next course. begrudgingly received yet marred by the spectre of unspoken truths. Wolfe grumbled, his gaze fixed firmly on the bowl as he motioned me to serve first. Before I could fulfill his request, the door swung open and there stood a woman, tall, draped in crimson, and framed by cascading waves of dark hair. She was neither an apparition nor a sinner, but a predator on the prowl. Mr. Wolfe. Her voice wove through the room with an elegance that only masked the tension beneath. Indeed, Wolfe replied, piloting his attention toward her with the unmistakable air of a man who had resolved his dinner's fate. And you are. Vivienne. I'm a friend of Solomon Gildersleeve. She stepped forward, carefully observing both Wolfe and myself, her eyes glimmering with a knowing shadow. I need your help, Mr. Wolfe. It concerns Garside. At this I interjected, curious and slightly surprised. That's an interesting collection of words right there. And what brings you to us concerning our unofficial acquaintance? Vivienne cast a sharp gaze in my direction, as if weighing the merit of my intrusion. Garside's digging deeper than any of us anticipated. After tonight's soirée, Solomon was certain he would reveal secrets that could unravel the Gildersleeve fortune. Something about that clock holds more than value. It's a key. A key to what? Wolfe asked, his interest piqued, as he offered her a seat, abandoning the stew temporarily. To treachery, she replied, leaning closer, her voice dropping to a murmur. A scandal involving the estate, something buried long ago but retained, like a treacherous heirloom. If Garside discovers it, we could lose everything. And you bring this to me now. Why? Wolfe demanded, his nostrils flaring with a tinge of irritation. Because Solomon trusts you, and you, she pointed a finger like a lance, are the only one who can stop him. Wolfe regarded the woman in silence, measuring the contents of her plea before speaking. And tell me, what distasteful fare do you propose? A confrontation with a man equipped with cunning far beyond your family's likability. I want you to follow him tonight. You must know where he's headed, what he's planning, before it's too late. Her insistence made the air feel thick with desperation. Well, I find myself ravaged by the very idea of venturing into the abyss without a meal. Wolfe countered with gravity. Dinner can wait. Garside won't, she rebutted fiercely, stirring something within him. Please, Archie, Wolfe muttered, drumming his fingers against the armrest, the smell of venison stew beginning to waft back into our haze. It appears fate, disguised in crimson lace, has deemed this evening's mischief worthy of attention. Judging by the lift of her chin and the intensity piercing her gaze, I agreed. Would you mind, Miss Vivienne, granting us some details? Knowing how Garside operates could be our best advantage. I'll prove I'm essential, she vowed, standing firm. Follow me only if you agree to act only once we know where he is headed. If he has a place, it might be where he plans to unleash chaos upon us all. And as she unfolded the location of Garside's next covert escapade, I felt a mind-bending twist looming, a potential unravelling of everything the Gildersleeve family had worked so hard to disguise. Wolfe turned the corner toward the door as anticipation crested high in the shadows behind us. Then let us depart forthwith, he proclaimed, his hunger overridden by the instincts of a true predator, as the last vestiges of evening faded into a night heavy with secrets and trembling promises. The game was afoot, and soon the ticking of the clock would be drowned beneath the echoes of a last tango in the heart of Manhattan's mysteries. Chapter 11. The Dark Side of the Moonlight. Rain-soaked streets shimmered like black glass as I ambled through the shadowy alleys of Manhattan, the evening air brisk against my overcoat. My thoughts oscillated between the enigma of Garside and the curious woman in crimson. Vivian had sparked not just curiosity, but a nagging apprehension. The clock was ticking, and I was all too aware of time's heavy hand. The brownstone loomed ahead, austere and solid, reminiscent of a ship facing a storm. Inside, the dim light illuminated Wolfe's fortress, but for all its warmth, it harboured a tangible tension that seemed to thrum in the air. I opened the door, shaking off the remnants of liquid sun. Wolfe sat in his armchair, an arbiter of elegance and lethargy, holding one of his precious volumes, a tome on orchids no less. He didn't glance up, rather grunted. "You've returned. Did you find Garside or merely your shadow?" "Both. Unfortunately, Garside decided to dance with his own shadows tonight. I shed my fedora, curiosity prickling at the edges of my subconscious. His whereabouts aren't hard to discern. He has an appointment with chaos." "Let me guess," Wolfe snapped, turning a page. "More drama than substance." "Hardly. It's a party. The Gildersleeves are hosting, but it's hosted with a grievous knowledge of impending doom." I rushed on, eager to share. Vivian was adamant that if Garside exposes whatever secrets those trinkets in that cursed family clock harbour, the ramifications would be cataclysmic. "Secrets, Archie." Wolfe finally lifted his gaze from the page, his brow furrowing. "Do you imagine they hold any softness? A reality entangled in the lust for wealth and power rarely does." His exasperation ignited my determination. "Precisely. If we wish to thwart Garside's ruinous intentions, we shall have to act." "Act, yes, but only upon first knowing what we stalk in the night. Do you understand? Without clarity, we become mere phantoms at a gravestone. Clarity will come when we analyse their behavioural patterns, my dear Wolfe," I replied, shifting onto the edge of the armchair across from him. "We shall not be mere spectators to Garside's carnival of destruction. We must take initiative." "Then you suggest we descend upon the Gildersleeves' soirée, masquerading as unwelcome guests in their gilded den?" His tone hinted at irritation, the kind carried with a meticulous plan disrupted. "Why not? Every great hunt requires a masquerade at its core." A rustle of fabric echoed through the room as Fritz entered, brandishing another steaming bowl of venison stew. The aroma enveloped us like cherished embraces, smothering any thoughts of impending doom, if only momentarily. "Dinner, Herr Wolfe," he announced, setting the bowl in front of the chief detective with a flourish. "And for you, Herr Archie, a little less. I serve only with discretion." Razored surprise flitted across Wolfe's face as he surveyed the generous portion before him. "You are, as always, underestimating my appetite, Fritz. Tonight it would be good not to have anything of consequence weigh upon your stomach," I said, unable to suppress a grin as I witnessed the soft battle of egos play out, like comedians on a stage where the punchline was always food. "True," Wolfe conceded. "Tonight the gala deserves neither my there nor my theft of costly fare." He surrendered with a sigh of resignation and lifted his spoon. "I'll return shortly." Keep the dinner warm. I'll need it post-haste, I said, rising without waiting for a reply. The energy within urged me forth into the murky depths of the evening's potential. As I made my way through the city's shadows, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drew my attention near the Gildersleeve estate, a stucco monument looming confidently among neighbouring brownstones. I slipped into the throng, my purpose sharp beneath my skin. Within a few moments, I spotted Garside lingering in a corner, his silhouette sharp against the crowd, a hawk among pigeons. He regaled two guests with a story, his mouth moving slick over the words. I angled closer, mindful of the absurdity of eavesdropping, yet my instinct screamed for more information. And there'll come a time, dear friends, when we must face what's buried. Garside animatedly gestured toward the heavy grandfather clock in the adjacent room. There lay the heart of it all, a scar on the tapestry of the Gildersleeve, legacy cloaked by denials and whispered fears. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through the din. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Garside," Solomon Gildersleeve, resplendent in a tailored suit, approached with a veneer of cordiality, one that dripped with barely restrained animosity. "Have you come to peddle more tall tales tonight?" "Why, Solomon," Garside smirked, "only the truth shall make a worthy companion to well-heeled tales. Why don't you turn the clock around and let us see how deep it ticks?" The laughter around him turned stale. The air thickened. I moved through the crowd, eager to interject, when Vivian appeared at my elbow, her crimson features vibrant against the muted tones of the affair. "Archie, I presume you had ears open," she said. "Quite, but we may need to push the edge of the theatre curtain. Garside's in earnest now. Then we act, and quickly," she murmured, pulling me toward the door that led into the adjoining study. By the time we entered, Garside was peering closely at the clock, a disquieting passion illuminating his features. I ducked behind a large vase, Vivienne at my side, and held my breath as the ticking clock pulsed ominously. "Ah, the clock shall tell us much," Garside cooed languidly, running his hand across its ornate carvings, secrets hidden, whispering in the wind, ripe for plucking. "Garside," Solomon's voice thundered from the doorway. "You'd do well to stay clear of that clock. It's best left alone." But Garside simply smiled, that grin a dagger, poised to plunge. Alas, a dance with consequences appears inevitable, dear Solomon. It was then that the clock began to chime, resonating through the stillness. Garside's expression morphed into chaos as he unwittingly triggered the mechanism. Behind him, a drawer, old and creaking, glided open. The moment hung suspended, as if the universe whispered secrets into the embrace of history. A shimmering, treacherous moment. And there, nestled in elegant velvet, lay an envelope. Its seal, broken yet pregnant with formidable tales. Garside's fingers hovered over the document as his eyes widened with a mixture of triumph and horror. "What have we here?" Fingers poised, I swept forward, seizing the envelope before Garside could engage despite the tumult around us. A trinket of unspoken truths, Garside, a gift for the ambitious. Garside pivoted furiously, ire painting his face. "You'll not thwart me, Archie Goodwin." Suddenly Vivian stepped forward, casting aside her trepidation, her voice faultless. "Or perhaps, Malcolm, This was never merely a dance. It appears you've stepped on the wrong toes. The piece clicked. Garside, for all his machinations, had woken the restless spirits lurking within the Gildersleeve clock. Secrets were about to unravel, heavier than gold, sharper than daggers. Wolfe had never been one to gamble with the unknown. He had merely turned the echoing wheel. As I stood there, envelope in hand, the night began to dissolve into whispers, and outside the moon shone down like a conspirator, witnessing the dark unveilings of a world bound by shadow and quarrelled legacies. The stage set, the curtain drawn, revealing the dark side of the moonlight, a gambit now in motion, lethal and compelling, as we would all soon discover. Chapter 12. The final curtain. Cool rain drizzled down the slick streets, creating a mosaic of reflections that danced beneath the sorrows of a grim skyline. The night's humidity mingled with the melancholy scent of damp earth, a perfect prelude to the drama unfolding within Wolfe's sanctuary. A brownstone that, under the weight of secrets, seemed to sigh with its own breaths of history. I pushed through the door, shaking droplets from my coat as I entered the library. Wolfe, ever the island of stillness in a tempest of chaos, was ensconced in his armchair, thumbing through the latest edition of the Orchid Journal. His great bulk loomed over its pages, and for a moment I hesitated to disturb him, except for the urgency pushing against my ribs. "Archie," he said without looking up, "the door is merely a thing made of wood and iron. You need not summon it for entry each time you return." "Noted, Wolfe. But I'd rather summon it than lose the ability to step back into your realm of callous comfort." I removed my hat slowly, the damp air clinging to my hair. "I do bear news, darkly interesting news. Then spare me the leaden oratory and deliver the news," he huffed, eyes not yet ungluing from the text. "Garside is still lurking in the Gildersleeve estate, a phantom in their midst. He's aiming to take centre stage tonight." I let the revelation linger like a fine wine before a dinner guest. "Centre stage? That is amusing coming from a creature of shadows." Finally, he set the journal aside and turned his sharp gaze to me. "What nonsense does your assertion hold, Archie?" "None, I assure you. He may as well have donned a sequined costume. He's prancing about, stupefying the Gildersleeves with tales of their past. They've gathered for the clock. Performance I'd liken to a masquerade, where everyone is too familiar with the dark secrets they wish to expose. I question the veracity of your dramatization, but your poetic embellishments aren't altogether unwelcome," he replied, his tone acerbic yet intrigued. "Come on, Wolfe, this is the real deal. Garside's made it sound like a cliffhanger, dangling a perilously close ledge. The whole cabal knows something is brewing, and it's bound to get ugly if we don't cut in. Then pray, what do you propose? Our invitations still remain unbestowed." "I was thinking we could find a way in. You know we're good at crashing parties," I suggested, a grin creeping across my face. "A gilded den deserves a couple of intrepid gate-crashers. No need to flaunt your flair for trespass, Archie. I would rather fortify my defences here. Honestly, I scarcely see the merit of your gambit." He returned his gaze to the journal, but I pressed on, relentless. The merit is in discerning Garside's intentions. Tonight he's after something, and whatever it is, it's festering in that grandfather clock. "We can't afford to remain idle this time, Wolfe," I insisted, with a resigned exhalation that held a world of exasperation, Wolfe finally put aside the journal. If you insist upon adventuring into the clutches of parasitic intrigue, then I shall accommodate you, with one condition. You will procure something from that wretched soirée that will mollify my appetite upon your return. Dinner at stake, eh? You have a deal. Just save room for a dessert that promises to be vexatious. I shot him a wink and turned toward the door, the prospect of danger stirring a visceral energy within me. I hailed a cab, a metallic creature glistening like an angry wasp against the shimmering streets. The Gildersleeve estate emerged into view, an opulent structure dressed in luxury too heavy to wear gracefully, its windows glowing with effulgent laughter and the promise of treachery. Inside, the rooms thrummed with life. Guests were adorned, in finery that glinted like fresh currency, their laughter pitched high above the ominous veil of secrecy. The atmosphere turned palpably thick, nearly saturating the air as I squeezed my way through the throng, eyes darting for the familiar figure of Garside. Finding him was simpler than I had anticipated. He stood proudly at the room's heart, regaling a small audience brimming with self-importance. And amid the shadow of the past, we shall find what no man dare imagine. His theatrics evoked stifled gasps, but I detected a layer of anticipation cloaking his every word. Garside! Solomon Gildersleeve's voice cut through the charade, dripping poison from behind clenched teeth. Do remember that this is quite a family affair. Ah, Solomon! Garside's gaze sparkled with predatory delight, as if the very confrontation was a tête-à-tête with fortune. I only fetch the truth to light. You conceal skeletons, and I simply unveiled a dance. The jest drew a cold smile from the guests, but the tension fell as heavy as the clouds outside. Before I could approach, Vivian, cloaked in crimson, appeared by my side. Archie, it seems destiny still finds Garside quite amusing, she murmured, her sharp gaze never leaving the clock looming behind Garside. He has intentions that exceed mere storytelling. Quite so. He's playing them like the trinkets they are, I replied, my thoughts racing. We need to act as crafters of our own fate. Without hesitation, Vivian and I slipped behind the sidelines to the edge of the clock's shadow. Garside, aglow with fervour, stepped closer, voices intertwined, an audience ever so eager. Perhaps I'll share with you all what the clock holds, the price it demands from each of you. Garside theatrically intoned, his fingers tracing the surface of the clock in a tantalizing caress. Do not tempt fate, Garside, Solomon boomed, but was drowned out by Garside's booming laughter. Our moment seized. I pushed forward despite the crowd's thrumming pulse, hand reaching for the clock's ornate latch. A gasp echoed as Garside turned on his heel, prying my intentions with predatory vigilance. Why, Archie Goodwin, have you come to witness your own downfall? Ignoring him, I yanked at the latch, and the clock swung open with a groan, revealing centuries of dust that had rested across forgotten tomes and trinkets. Muffled sounds thickened the air as the audience absorbed what was now an indisputable act, and from behind a concealed drawer, silence throbbed ominously. Inside, a delicate ledger lay, a ledger that glimmered with promises and debts tied tighter than knots in old ivy. Ah, yes! Garside leapt forward with a grin poised to split his face. So deeply buried, isn't it? Before he could lay hands on the secrets concealed within, I snatched it first. "You seem far too eager, Malcolm." I smiled, tension electric around us. His sharp smile faltered. "You really think you can just intervene without repercussions?" "The only repercussion is eating your words, Garside," I replied, glancing toward Vivian for support. As urgency tangled our fates, the room held its breath as the outcome hung delicately on a thread, woven from histories still alive within their unsettling pages. "Intriguing, isn't it?" I mused aloud while feeling the pressure of every eye upon me. "Words hold more weight than you'll ever know. And tonight, I'd wager they reveal a legacy unacceptable to get stained with blood." Suddenly, Garside lunged forward, his face twisted into sheer malevolence. "Stand aside," he spat. A fractured heartbeat pulsed between us, and before I could react, Solomon erupted from the shadows, stepping forward with a glare so fierce it could have cut through steel. "You will not lay a hand on what isn't yours, Garside." Their momentum shifted. The ledger became a storm, and the room transformed into a theatre of dark overtures. With one decisive motion, I thrust the ledger into Solomon's grasp. "Reap what you've sown, Solomon. Now there's no flight from the past." As heads turned in stunned silence, Garside recoiled, his bravado wilting beneath the weight of a menace he had awakened. The grandfather clock chimed boldly, echoing within the walls like a judge's gavel, marking the end of our tangled play. All secrets refused to stay concealed. In the awakening silence, I turned to Vivian, our eyes locking, a silent acknowledgement of fate heavier than the clock's gilded face. And within that fleeting moment, amid the melody of uncertain promises, I knew we had staged a finale that neither Garside's felonies nor the Gildersleeve's legacy could ever escape. A masterstroke, delivered, the curtain clanking down upon the timeless intrigue woven between us. The end.